I'm going to sing a little bit at the beginning.
Okay.
All right, here we are live. I'm going to sing a little bit.
Oh,
Here we go. Yeah, okay. So that was already live when I said that. Haha, very good. That's the way it works. You're always live before you think so. This is the theme song to my work, Healing with the Blues. That's right, I'm healing with the blues. I've got nothing left to lose. That's why I'm healing with the blues. Such a pain inside. The love that's there for me, I have denied. I've never had the blues this long, this deep, this wide. That's why I'm healing with the blues. So I want to welcome everybody to this Zoom chat that we're having today. And we have Jude Evans and Sally Roberts here. I'm so glad to have you guys here. It's so fun to get to chat with you about this. And we kind of started chatting before we went live. So just so you know, we're already into it. And one of the things that we were talking about was why children aren't taught how to grieve in a way that is for them. Like we were talking about moving away from home, or your best friend moves, or you don't have that teacher that you loved anymore because she's in a different grade and now you're moving on. And so we don't really have a way for children to express that grief, because loss isn't just when someone dies. Loss of lifestyle, loss of a job, all of these things that I've mentioned happen to us as adults too. I mean, our friends move away. Oh, we're going to be snowbirds now. We're moving far away from you. You know, like, okay, well, I guess I'll never see you again. But it's, you know, we have this technology, so we don't have to be that far removed from people, but which is wonderful. But there's still a lot of grief work that could happen. And Jude, you brought up some interesting points about, you know, could we do it as an art form? Is there a ritual we can do that will help us move through that? And I'd love for you to just tell me what you were thinking when you thought of that.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Jude. Around 6 years ago, I trained to be an end-of-life doula, and it was one of the most fantastic things I've ever done in my life. One thing in particular stood out at me, which is why I'm here talking about grief. We did a deep dive into the meaning of grief, what grief means, how it's expressed. But we were also asked to explore other cultures, and we had to choose 3 different cultures who had grief rituals. And I was aware of some rituals. I'm an avid reader, and I particularly love African grief rituals. And most of them center around women. So the grief that I looked at involved keening, which is a Scottish and Irish, and one in Africa, which also involved the whole process of, as soon as somebody dies, it's a cue to the women to start the whole process. And what really struck me was how we grieve in isolation in the West, and really grieving ideally should be a community response to an event that women in particular know instinctively, intuitively, if they haven't had past knowledge on how to recognize grief in other people, how to recognize grief, like we said, not just when somebody dies, but the processes that we go to when we suffer a loss, and we feel bereft of that loss, whatever form that loss takes. So for me, we really need to recognize the many forms of grief and start to equip ourselves with tools and skills and knowledge of how we can transition through grief in a healthy, positive way. And if we can do that for ourselves personally, then we can also recognize that in other people. So we can support when necessary, when it's needed, when asked to, in a very positive way, because the messages that we tend to get are, well, you should be over that by now, or, oh, you know, you'll be all right, it's fine, a pat on the head.
People never know what to say.
Yeah,
Like,
people
just
walk
say, I'm
the other
here.
way, you know, through not having knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be so healthier if we understood what grief is, we understood the many, many forms it can take, and how we can address it, and how we can pass that on to our children as well, so they grow up knowing what grief is, knowing when they're experiencing grief, and knowing who they can turn to within their communities to support them in their sense of loss.
Yeah. And a lot of people went through that during COVID because they lost their lifestyle. It was over. There was no meeting up. There was no going to have dinner with friends. There was no interaction in that way. And I think for people who went through that, they also had loss of a loved one that they couldn't get to.
Yeah.
So there's that whole, like a double loss, like I can't even be there for them. So that it's kind of like a pile on situation. And Sally, I just thank you for introducing yourself, Jude. I was going to do that and you kind of did it really well. Thank you. And that we have Sally here, who's owns a busy health clinic and has a wonderful managing superstar who runs it day to day so she can go out and have fun playing tennis and be in her garden and enjoy her family. And I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts were about that, Sally.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, actually, as you were talking, Jude, I was also thinking that, for children, now we've become, the news, so-called, has become so ubiquitous that it's on in the background and children are exposed all the time to massive world grief and collective grief that they can have no understanding of how to manage. And I think it really behoves us, older women, to be the superstars who actually can talk to children, read to them, make sense of this stuff, because it's confusing. It's really confusing and distressing.
I remember when I was a child, they had just started telling us they were having nuclear bomb drills in school, and we had to go to the basement and sit against the wall. And what that does to you, and I know it happened for you all too, because there was a war there. And you were getting bombed at that time and back in World War II. But the idea that fear and that level of insecurity goes on and gets passed down through our vibration to our children too. So now they have it. Yeah. And it's been going on and on for so long, especially with regards to war. We're seeing that now. That
sense of powerlessness that you're left with, particularly as a child. Right. And if at least you can teach a child to understand their own reactions and how to respond to what's going on around them, and maybe teach them that even though something they're seeing on the television, like a massacre in the States, in the school, is not here, it's not in their front room, it's not in their school. And, they can be empathic, but actually I think we need to show them that because it's something they can do nothing about, they need not to take it into their cells, not to embody it.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things that happens here is we have groups that are trying to get laws changed so that this can't happen, but people are becoming much more aware of mental health. Yes. And the fact that people who are ostracized, bullied, and isolated don't do well in society. And that's a problem. So what we're seeing now is more empathic, more empathetic children who are going out of their way. It's interesting to me that they still have this, there's this Hollywood idea that there's always a bully in every school, and the bullies will get their comeuppance. That doesn't happen in every school. There are schools that teach how to diffuse a bully, and there's also places where they reward children for reaching out to other children to make sure that they feel included. So there's a whole generation that's going through this here, where they're learning, yeah, you can't do that to people and have it be okay. It's not okay. So I think we're getting, as much as it feels like it's not working, there is this undercurrent of working. One of the kids from the Florida school that was where people were shot and killed is starting a fund to help that generation go into politics. Yeah. So it's David Hogg is his name, and he's doing great work with that. And then there are people that, you know, fight against him. Why? I don't know.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think part of the subject here is how can grief be a portal into something else? Yep. And there he is. He's been subjected to this really devastating experience. Yeah. And he's obviously been well enough supported that he's being able to step into his power and actually use his power for good. And I love that story. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, look for him. He's really doing some wonderful things. One of the things that I talk about in the work that I do with people is going through something that's tragic. In my case, it was a stillbirth of our first child together, and seeing, you know, okay, so this is a big deal. This is, you know, the 2x4 of harsh reality hitting me in the head. What am I supposed to gain out of this? Because if I really believe that everything happens to the highest good, okay, well, show me the good, because this is not good that I can see. But then as time goes on, more and more good comes out of it. Like a conversation like this, where we're actually talking about what's most important to people who are suffering catastrophic losses. We have a hurricane in Florida right now. We've had fires in Hawaii and all over Canada and the Northwest. And it's just, there's so much going on. We have to be able to be in touch with our feelings. You can't suppress your feelings anymore. And I feel like this may be the reason why it's all happening. That if I look at the big picture, people are being put through the ringer because we're squeezing out all the stuff that's keeping us from connecting with each other in a really meaningful way. Those walls have to come down. If we're gonna, I put up a post the other day in LinkedIn, and it was a beautiful video of 1,500 drones as a dragon flying through the sky. Computerized drones, absolutely beautiful, amazing technology. It's the same creative force, the same creative power that is the same as the healing power that we have. So if we can do that with technology, let's bring our awareness, our emotional awareness up to that level too. Why not? I mean, what have we got to lose?
I agree. My mum, who was born in 1916, always used to say to me, every generation needs its war. And the reason she said that was because it brought people together. You know, it made people come into community and drop all of their sort of social networks and things and support each other. And I mean, this is our war in a way, is the climate stuff that's going on, this is what's happening. Yeah,
and also that leaning toward fascism that we're seeing in lots of different places.
I think communities also formed when the people recognize that there's a common necessity, rather than out of an ideology. And the common necessity, I think, is so many people now are kind of watching the old world burn, and that carries a huge amount of grief with it. However, like you said, it's almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes. You know, from that grief, we can rebuild a parallel world, a world that we choose, a world that we want to live in.
Yeah.
So in that sense, to go through the process of the dying, the grief, the rebirth, in order to create something much, much better, much more conducive to humanity, and create a system that works for humanity rather than humanity working for a system that doesn't serve them or
It's
no
not
longer.
sustainable, as we're seeing. It's totally unsustainable. You can't just get more and more and more stuff and things and money or whatever it is. There has to be some kind of harmony that happens, and you know, we're seeing it. Like you said, you have to really, I think people have to really look at the big picture, not just this small one that I mean, yeah, there's losses going on for sure with people. If we learn how to grieve, and I'm very interested, Jude, for you to talk about some of the cultures that you studied when you were studying how these cultures grieve, and the women coming together to do it, bringing somebody into the world and sending somebody out, is a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
I've actually helped clients who are going through the loss of their parent, help them manage their experience with the parent, and it can be an incredibly beautiful experience. So could you speak to that a little bit?
The called the rituals around grieving, they're ancient. They're absolutely ancient, and they're steeped in meaning and connection. So nobody, I don't think, who is involved in healthy ritual is allowed to fall by the wayside or allowed to hold trauma in their body. And that grief doesn't bite them on the bum in 5, 10, 15 years time, or some diagnosis of what's it called, you may know, some kind of trauma and grief where you're stuck in perpetual grief. And you can't see a way out of it. Your life stops. You can't
get stuck in it. People get stuck in it.
Yeah, you can't find the joy of life anymore, such as the enormity of your loss, because you personally don't know how to deal with it. The community around you doesn't know how to deal with it. So everybody remains in a state of kind of a low vibration. Whereas really when death occurs, and it kind of just touches onto another subject of our attitude towards death, dying, our own mortality.
Absolutely.
But they sort of go hand in hand with the grieving process. But if we're going to, remain healthy, if we remain whole, then we have to start to bring back sort of rituals, grieving rites. And I'm kind of starting to come up with an idea based on the idea of death cafes. I don't know if either of you have attended a death cafe.
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
They're wonderful places. Have you, Sally? Yeah.
Yeah,
they are the most uplifting places that you could possibly imagine. And it's interesting. Yeah, but when you say to somebody, I'm going to a death cafe, you kind of know where the conversation's going to go by the look on their face. If it's one of pure horror, you just go, oh, okay. But to go, oh, really? You can have a great conversation. And they're not grief cafes, they are death cafes to explore anything under that infinite subject of death. But we could have grief cafes as well.
Absolutely.
Where people come to explore the whole subject of grieving in whatever form it takes, and through just through little acorns, mighty oaks can grow, because it's needed. It's needed, you know, if we're going to rebuild our society in the ways that we want it to be, then we need to be strong. We need to be robust, and we need to know our stuff, you know. We need to know how to deal with life's tough trials and tribulations and come through them with passing flying colours and pass them on.
Yeah, teaching honest communication and not, you know, I'm afraid to tell this person something. Well, the fear is what's holding you back, not the actual telling of the thing, but what's the fear there? What's that all about? Because when we stop ourselves from communicating, that's where things really can go south quickly. So we talk about in healing, the type of healing I do is when we're suppressing our feelings, we're pushing them down, and they're going to come out some other way, because feelings are just they're like a suit of physiology that we wear. So we have a physiology for every feeling that there is. The positive ones, the negative ones, they all have their own physiology. And when we suppress it, that physiology doesn't stop. It continues, because now we're not addressing it. We're not confronting it. We're not acknowledging it. When we acknowledge, own, and honor our feelings, then we can release them, and now they're not working on us anymore, under the surface, being subconscious. So I work on a lot of subconscious emotional memories that override present time. So that's post-traumatic stress. We're working on all those patterns that become suddenly it's not anybody's fault. This is the way human beings are. We memorize what puts us into not survival and what puts us into survival, because that's the only two modes that the physical body knows: survive, not survive. So if we're in fight or flight response, that's not survive. So the body's going to do whatever it needs to do to survive. Well, we can help it. We don't just have to wait and hope that I hope it does that. No, we can actually help it along. That 4-count breathing is a really good example of how you can help it and bring yourself back from fight or flight into rest, digest, and heal. Those two modes that your autonomic nervous system is running all the time. So the techniques that help you do that would be like emotional freedom technique. That's the tapping technique, where you're tapping acupuncture meridians, acknowledging, owning, and honoring your feelings while you're doing that is powerful, powerful stuff. And it's so simple, so easy.
And also recognizing that you are grieving as well. I know, speaking from personal experience, when I was 12, my whole family moved from the northeast to the northwest, and I left behind my entire extended family, my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, my grandparents. And for years and years, I was just a lost and lonely soul. You know, I had no idea. And it was kind of so traumatic, but I had no idea what was happening to me. I just went from being a happy, confident child, I was completely numb, you know. I had no way of expressing it. I had no support. Mum and dad didn't really understand what was going on. They were probably dealing with their own. My two brothers were also plunged into confusion. And the impact of not being aware of your grieving, or being plunged into grief without acknowledgement, can take a lifetime to unravel, because you start to
Absolutely.
build a reality based on this new reality that you've been put into. And then all the trials and tribulations that come from that come from a place of trauma or unresolved grief.
Yep.
And you sort of start to live a false reality with all its attendant problems.
Yeah, going along to get along as a child,
Yeah.
coping with whatever it is you have to do because you got to get along so
Yeah.
that things don't go south completely. And
That's not even just with children. I think adults also have got no idea that they've been plunged into grief.
absolutely.
So
And
if
it's,
we're
where do you start? Is it with the children so they educate the adults, or they're educated as they become adults, or do you educate the adults so that they can support the children? It's
whenever we get the opportunity to educate anybody, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would just do with who's in front of you. In my practice, I tell parents who say, well, I want to bring my child in, well, you have to come in too, because you're just going to pass this back and forth. So I'm not going to work on a child without working on their primary caregiver, because it's not going to work. In fact, it proved itself out recently. I had a woman that had been a patient of mine. She goes, well, I want my daughter to come in, and her daughter refused. After a session, she's like, no, I'm not doing it. So the mom needs to come in. See, this is, and when you change as an adult, when you change, everybody around you has to change how they react to you. So now you're subconsciously giving off this vibration of, I'm okay now, and we can do this. And I don't have all that resistance that I had before about how you're not okay and we have to do something about you, which is a lot of heavy energy for a kid, no matter how
children
old
can
they are.
read that body language, can't they? They can see so easily. Well, I had a patient once who came to see me, and she had ME, and
What's
and
ME
physical,
for people who don't know?
myoencephalic something. What's it stand for? It's sort of like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
you know what it is, don't you?
People give me lots of initials, and we have so many things right now. They're coming out with a new disease every day, and then they advertise the drug for it, and I'm like, what the hell is that?
Well, exactly. Well, she had a diagnosis, you know, and she was on
Yeah.
blah blah blah. But she was, and I was treating her as a physiotherapist. But you know, like you do, Tanya, just reading her body language, reading her energetic imprint. And she started to talk to me about her daughter who was having physical problems. And then she went on to tell me about her mother who was elderly and not very well. And I said, well, your daughter is grieving for her granny. And are you talking to her about the grief? And it hadn't even occurred to her that her daughter, she thought she was managing everything for her daughter, you know, because she was saying, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. And it's like sort of that.
Do you all know what fine means? Frustrated, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. I think that's part of it, but yeah.
Well, it's like that lovely analogy of it's a pile of shit and then you've got some polish over the top of it so it shines. You know, it's yeah. And I talked to her about it, and I told her or taught her how to talk to her daughter, and the daughter got better. She couldn't get over it. She was blown away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how much we assume. Terrible word, but it actually happens. People assume, oh, she's fine. She's fine. And really what people want is connection. Even if they say they're fine, they really want connection. And because we've, especially here, grown up in the society where the individual is all and the group is okay, and if it's a really big group, then it's a problem, right? But the individual, that's the king, right? And we forget that you can't really have all that with an individual unless they have all the support that they need. And like you were saying, it takes a lifetime to sometimes recognize that I didn't have the support I needed. So I work with people who are probably not fresh into grief, but who are like going, I never actually dealt with that. I need to do something about it. And then things start to open up once they deal with it. I have a whole bunch of grief about an institution that I was part of for a while, where I was going to school, and things happened during this stillbirth, and I still have a problem with the institution because they didn't support me at all. In fact, they kind of punished me. And I'm having to deal with that now. And it's, been a long time, but it's still, there's layers that come up. So it's not that I haven't done anything about it, obviously, but sometimes new layers show up and then it's ready to be healed. So I think people want to remember too, that it's not just a one and done kind of thing. There are new layers of situations that have happened in your life that you suddenly go, oh, I need to deal with this again. Gee, I thought I dealt with that. Well, you did when that layer showed up. But you have to remember there's more there. That's why I say the darkest, deepest tragedy is also a well of blessings. You got to go in there and look for it. You have to go in there and see. There's a great saying called seek and you'll find. So what are you seeking? Are you seeking to suppress what you felt? Are you seeking to be free of it? What are you seeking? And so as you're deciding what you want to look for, it starts showing up. And then we have conversations like this that can help so many people, because this is going to go on YouTube and you all have to share it so people know that there's people talking about this stuff. And when we do that, more people go, oh, I never thought of it like that. And then there's
there's people out there who can help me.
Yeah.
Reach out, ask. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also starting to recognize that a situation that maybe they've never resolved is coming from a place of grief. And once they understand that, then it's easier to start to acknowledge and take steps to see how that's impacted and how to deal with its impact, to move forward free from the life that it created for you, rather than the one that you could have been living, just by a change of perception and a change of feeling.
Yeah, no regrets. I mean, we all get to the healing part when we're ready for it.
Yeah.
If we pursue that. If you don't pursue it, the chances are you're not going to find it very quickly. But
in a healthy society, we should all be looking to do as much work as possible, so we all collectively live in the light. That there isn't a need really, if we kind of look ancestrally, historically, and I'm talking, thousands of years ago. I'm not looking through rose-tinted glasses, but nobody was allowed to carry trauma, because the wisdom was such that as soon as trauma had gone into a body or a person, steps were immediately taken to release that trauma.
That's right.
And you know what? Once collective wisdom starts to grow, we can share that knowledge, so more and more people can come out of their trauma to live whole, healthy lives.
There's a really interesting technique called trauma release. And it's where you're like an animal. When they have trauma, they get up and they shake it off. Humans don't do that. They get up and go, oh, that happened. Let me suppress any feeling I have about it. Try to get on with my day. Yeah. Or drink, or have some other kind of addiction that will dull them so they don't feel it. And we've all been through that. I mean, we've all used different things to try to distract ourselves from how painful things can be. And instead, what we could do is do trauma release therapy, emotional freedom technique, bioenergetic synchronization technique. There's all kinds of ways that we can do this. People don't realize how easy it is. They want to take a pill because that's magic, but that's not really the magic, and it doesn't really do what it says it's going to do. The magic is using these ways that your body, mind, spirit is telling you, I need you to do this, and just following it along. So a lot of what I do with my clients is get them to slow down their thinking so that they don't just jump to the next thing. And they go, wait a minute, let me observe, how am I reacting to this? Why am I reacting that way? Let me explore that a little bit. So it makes them have to slow way down instead of just tossing off a phrase. Oh, I'm fine. Really? Tell me about that. Tell me about how fine you are. Let's get into fine.
And I think also, just sort of following on from what you were saying, not everybody can train to be a counsellor. Those things require time, patience, commitment, money. But one thing we can all do, which is completely free, is really learn to listen. Really, really start to tune in to the whole concept of listening. You can pick up very easy information just from a book, but once we can develop our own listening skills, we don't need to be able to offer sage advice. We can just simply listen, because people then go into a self-curing mode as they start to talk about what's coming up. And if they're heard and they're not judged, they're not interrupted, they will continue to self-heal. Because I think we all know, once we feel listened to, we start to think, oh, I'm answering my own questions. So the power of listening as well is so important. And it's a very easy, free thing that we can all develop to support and help each other. And people love to feel, I think you said, connected to each other and felt, seen, heard.
And connected to source too, because when you're connected to source, you can do something like automatic writing, where you meditate on a question, you write it down and ask for the answer and see what comes in, and just write it out. And you'd be surprised at how amazing the answers are. And you're creating that answer. You're being the vessel for that energy that is of creation, that energy that's in every cell, molecule, and atom, and all the space in between that's running us right now. That energy has all the answers that we would ever need. And
our unconscious mind has all the answers, actually. And sometimes that's how I work, is I ask the questions. And I don't need to know the answer, because once I've asked you the question, your unconscious mind will give you it.
Unconscious, superconscious, source energy, it's all what we're talking about. That's the healing power that we have always within us, in every cell. We're a self-healing mechanism. I mean, if we weren't, you'd see all the scars from the paper cuts I've ever gotten, right? We don't see those. If we weren't, go ahead.
Just going back a little bit to how death can be a portal to something else. Just very briefly, my mum died very prematurely when she was 76. Her mother died at 91, her brother at 93. I was expecting her to last for at least another 20 years. And she popped her clogs, having had cancer. And I grieved for her for 10 years. I mean, I'd go and see my homeopath and she'd say, "How are you, Sally?" And I would be a puddle on her floor. And eventually it was absolutely a portal to, and I'm so grateful to her 30 years on, And in fact, 30 years ago, this last December was the day, the 30-year, and I wrote her a letter and said, thank you, thank you, thank you, because it was just extraordinary, that grief that just kicked me off my hamster wheel of everyday life and said, nah, there's more to life than this. And I think that that's a huge thing that happens to a lot of people, is this come on, there's something greater. If we're blessed, if we're very fortunate to be
And
able
if we're
to
ready for it too. I was talking with somebody the other day, and they just were not ready to look at that in any other kind of way. They had their way of looking at it, and that was the way it was. And I was like, okay, well, there's not a lot we can do if you're just gonna stay there. So it was difficult, and yet at the same time, I'm like, maybe I should have pointed out to her that she's in grief about the things that didn't work out, and she needs to do something about that grief. And doing a ritual like we're talking about here, doing a ritual that would help her release that would be, a good thing for her to do. And call in all the people that would help you with that. Just call them in and say, we're going to do this thing, and and then we'll have pie afterwards. Right? Just make it something simple so that we could do it easily and not have to make it, a big production. It doesn't have to be. Actually, tonight I'm going to a full moon dance out by a little lake nearby. And I think it's a really good ritual for grief too, to go to the full moon, use that as a marker. It's, you don't have to be of any religious persuasion. It's the moon, okay? It's going to be there. And we use it as a way to mark what we are going to let go of or what we're going to bring in, and allow it to just inform us what's next. Can I lay this down? Partially, maybe. Can I lay some of this down and move forward in a different way? Just using those markers that we already have in place in life are it's so easy. It's so right there.
It
So
is, but you have to be willing. You have to be willing. That's
yeah. So I'm putting on my crystals out in the moonlight tonight, so they get all cleansed with moonlight. You can see all the little tiny
Yeah. You're going to be
angels I have.
singing as well.
glow in the dark angels, and
You're
set
going
them
to
all
be
out
singing too.
and go dance around in the moonlight.
lovely.
And
Yeah.
sing.
Probably.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It'll happen, I'm sure. And allow it to just take whatever form it's going to take. I think people get so stuck on how it should be. And by the way, those stages of grief, they happen all willy-nilly, and some of them don't happen at all. And there's new ones that come in. And so you don't have to go by that. You don't have to name everything. It helps if you know how you feel, though.
For sure.
It helps if you know how you feel. So lists of feelings. There's a great book that I use called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And there's many lists of feelings in there. There's also a beautiful script that you can use to clear Feelings Buried Alive Never Die by, who wrote that? It's Carol Truman, Carol with a K, Truman. And what's really interesting about it is it talks about like these unexpressed emotions are working on us all the time. This is my work in general, is to help people release that, because that's interference. You're not going to get the good answer if you're still stuck in that loop. So we want to clear those loops, and so you can get that clear answer from your unconscious, from source energy, and allow it to be something that's really meaningful to you. So simple. And yet we think it has to be so difficult, but it's just not. It's just not.
I think also very often people get very stuck in their story. You were saying, Jude, that if you listen, people can start to heal. I've done this in the past, and sometimes a well-placed question you
Mhm.
know, because otherwise they're in this little vortex where they go round and round in the same, I call it the Shrek swamp, you know, where he sits and farts. And it's that, you know, actually, what would happen if this could be different? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, how can this be easy? Or what would you like to have happen that might make a change? You know, something that's really simple.
Directing the conversation as well as listening.
Open-ended questions. Yeah. Open-ended questions. So the person has to think about the answer and not just yes or no, or I'm fine. Yeah. There's a podcast that I searched because I'm searching for podcasts on grief. And one of them is Terrible. Thanks for asking. And I just love the title of that. So I want to get on that podcast. But Terrible. Thanks for asking. I'm terrible. That's what we need to say if that's how we're feeling.
Yeah,
I'm
we need
terrible.
to be more honest, don't we? Yeah, I'm feeling terrible today, thank you.
I remember when our baby was stillborn, there were a lot of people that didn't know. And so people would ask me, oh, how's the baby doing? And I would say, he's doing great. He's doing better than you and me. He's in heaven. Whatever you experience about that, it just, you know, you don't want to go into the whole story because then they go, oh, and then your energy goes down. So it's just better to just go, they're great. He's doing great. Thanks for asking. Easy. But
That's a really beautiful response, isn't it? And that also says about your attitude and your deep personal feelings around sort of transitioning.
there was a point in this where it, you know, it's just exhausting because everybody wants to cry with you. And you're like 2 weeks on, you're like, oh my God, I can't listen to another person tell me how sorry they are about what happened. It's just enough. And I've told this story before, but my husband and I are not sad people. We're happy, joyful people. And so we were watching television and a woman came on and said, there is nothing worse than a yeast infection. And we both went, oh, well, thank God we didn't have that. We just had our baby die. That's no, okay, great. Because there's nothing worse. Okay, good. So we were rolling on the floor. I mean, it was just one of those things that's so ludicrous. You just have to laugh at it, at what you're going through. I mean, it was a great release for us to be able to laugh at something so silly and ridiculous.
Very
and also
healing. Very healing.
very healing. Yeah. Having somebody come over to visit us that was having terrible tooth pain. Oh, good. Somebody else is in pain and we can help him. We don't need the help. We can help him. So a lot of times, and I've heard this before, when people are destitute and they're relying on charity, one of the things that they miss, this is also a grief thing, they miss not being able to have celebrations with family and have a big meal, and they can't do it because they don't have it. And there's grief around that. So when they're asked to do something, I need help, will you help me? It's like the clouds part and the sun shines because somebody needs my help. And I'm not the one that has to say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, all the time, knowing that they're doing this because they know I'm in need. Feeling needed is a very powerful experience.
Absolutely.
And it's very healing for the poor in spirit to be asked to do something, to be support for someone else is a huge gift.
I think that's very fundamental for women. It's part of our whole feminine being, to be needed by our community, to step up and to share what it is we know, and how we can help other people. It's definitely not a one-way process, is it? It comes back tenfold.
No, and I think that's why, it's said that it's better to give than to receive. Receiving is pretty darn good, right? But giving gives you power. it doesn't just leave you bereft or less than, it actually gives you power. So we also have to watch out for people who constantly give, because what are you trying to make up for? Right? Are you trying to be good so you'll be loved and accepted? Are you trying to distract yourself from what you really need to be giving to yourself? People who are constantly volunteering for things, I have to tell my sister, put your hand down. Just tie your arm to the side of your body. She's been working with volunteers all her life. She's a wonderful volunteer coordinator. She knows the ins and outs of all of that. And she's learned over a period of time, like, this is what happens when you just ask for volunteers. You have to do something about it. It's very interesting that she has that knowledge. And yet I'm like, put your hand down. Don't say yes. And picking and choosing what we really feel like we can go at, what we can give to, too. Because there's sometimes I got real fatigued from working with a group here, because it's about, moms demand action for gun sense in America is the group. It's a great group. We do a lot of things, and I occasionally do things with them now, but the grief that it kept triggering in me was so enormous that I just had to back off a bit. So you have to know what your limits are too for that. And I still do things with them and support that group. I just have to be careful about what I put there. I'm a little too empathetic. Just a little bit too much.
Support them energetically without having to actually be right there. And
exactly.
Yeah. It's what I call being selfish. CELL fish. Go fish what your cells need.
Yes, I love that. CELL fish. I love it. Go fish for what your cells need. That's great, Sally. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that too.
Beautiful. We're coming to the end of our time, and I just wanted to know if there was something that you wanted to share with people that are going to watch this, that you would like a gift or a thought like that was beautiful, that you really wanted to make sure that we talked about today.
I think we've covered quite a lot in a huge subject, but I think for me it's maybe a little bit more determined to take the prospect of a grief cafe into my local community, just to see if there are people who would come, and it's a way into exploring with the community how we can address this collectively, because I can sit here on Silver Tent TV and I can talk about teaching the children, teaching the community, and then switch it off and do nothing. But I feel really encouraged after the conversation to go out there and go, hey guys, let's talk about grief. Let's explore the subject. Let's see if we can help make a difference in our community. Living in a village, that is quite a very real prospect. That we could do that. If I was living in a city, it would all be quite lost.
Well, yeah, that brings up this comment that we have from Lorna, that she says the war is within us. Inner conflict, when we address it there, it stops. So yeah, exactly.
So yeah, for me, I think what my little takeaway is to keep exploring the subject and keep bringing it into the consciousness. And yeah, I'll let you know if I start a little grief cafe.
Wonderful, thank you. I just wanted to read a couple more comments that we had. We had a comment that about emotional intelligence. I feel we have not been guided with this part of ourselves to regulate and use it with grief and shake it out from our bodies. Yeah, that's absolutely what we're talking about. And also ME, myalgic encephalitis. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, it's really interesting because I know if I feel grief, and I did this week at one stage, my heart actually aches. I can feel my heart aching, but now I've learned to pay attention to it. And I would just encourage anybody to just stop and breathe and just feel what your body is saying to you, because that is such a wonderful feedback loop. And you don't need to do anything. Just put your hand on the bit of you that is hurting and soothe, self-soothe. And I think part of what we've talked about is maybe giving people the language. You know, it's not in common usage. So maybe now we can start to really open up the emotional intelligence and the language around grief. And it's okay. It's okay.
So on that note, Sally, and it is okay, we have in this country, the leading cause of death in women is heart disease. And why? Why would that be the leading cause?
Heartbreak.
Because we're heartbroken, because our heart breaks for people we don't even know. And the heart has more electrical energy and is the first thing that starts to use electrical energy separate from the brain. That's why you can be brain dead and still be alive. So I'm going to tell you something that I teach in every class. Hug each other on the left. Bring your hearts together. And the reason why you do that is because it will feel actually different. You hug your friend. Okay, you could practice with a friend or a loved one. Hug them on the right for 10 seconds. Everybody goes toward the right. Mostly everybody does. And then push them away from you and say, it's really good to see you if you're with somebody. And you don't have to tell them what you're doing, and then bring them in on the left. And then hold that for 10 seconds. And what you're going to find is that person starts to melt. They just melt. Or they're really super uncomfortable. But they're not a hugger. When I would do this in class, I'd say, who in here is not a hugger? Okay, you guys stand in the back, because we're all going to be hugging each other. You can either get in on it or you don't have to. But I would suggest that if you're not a hugger, you try this and see. See if it works for you.
Treat yourself.
Yeah, why not? There's a way for you to step out easily. Yeah. So what we do is put your hand over your heart, put both hands over your heart. You can do it right now and just say, I love being me. I love being me.
I love
being me. And I love being with you guys too. The wild women of the silver tent.
It's been wonderful.
Awesome thing. I didn't sing very much today, but I'll tell you, I have a couple of announcements. I'm going to be performing at the Mississippi Valley Blues Festival in Davenport, Iowa in September. I'm giving away tickets. If you go to LinkedIn, or you go to one of my groups, Healing with the Blues, that's a group. There's also a page, there's also a website, but if you go to the group, you'll see some videos that I'm putting up and you can win a ticket. If you want to come over here and see what the Mississippi River's all about, that'd be great. I'm just so honored to be with you today, and just thank you so much for your beautiful knowledge and sharing, and your wonderful open hearts. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Many blessings. We'll do it again. Let's do it again. All right. Take care.